Hello and welcome to Spirit and Truth. I just want to talk a little bit about Jesus being the perfect representation of the Father. So we've had a couple of, I've probably already talked about this if you've seen a few of these, but there's two verses that just stand out, and it's John 5:19 and John 12:49 about Jesus being this perfect representation of the Father. And in one of them it says that he only does what he sees the Father doing, and in another it says he only says what he hears the Father say. And so the Father is the one that has all of these directions going on in heaven. And Jesus is constantly checking in, constantly looking at him. Father, what are you doing here in this situation? He's hearing him, and then he's speaking it, and he's going about doing those actions. And so we start to understand what is the will of God a little bit through Jesus's life. And I know this isn't probably a new thing for everyone, but maybe it is. So I just wanted to talk a little bit in regards to Jesus' ministry. And I was going to pull out the point of healing, because that really is something that sometimes we struggle with. Is it God's will to be sick or not? And if we take that Jesus was a perfect representation of the Father, then we're seeing the Father's will enacted over those 3 years of ministry in Jesus's life. And in that time, we never hear of Jesus smiting anybody with sickness. So the Father's will, in these cases at least, seems like he's not using sickness to bring people to him or in that way. Actually, we see Jesus saying, no, the kingdom coming is sickness being driven out, that I have come to do this thing, to drive the kingdom out, to bring the kingdom here to earth. Not to drive the kingdom out, to release the kingdom and drive darkness out. And so we see that happening. And so I'm going to read a couple verses, and it's just something that we can reflect on as we look at Jesus. Just think about how Jesus is being led by the Father in these moments and what he's saying and what he's acting. So Matthew 8 is where I'm going to start, and this is verses 16 and 17 out of the ESV. That evening they brought to him many who were oppressed by demons, and he cast out the spirits with a word and healed all who were sick. This was to fulfill what was spoken by the prophet Isaiah. He took our illnesses and he bore our diseases. So we see here that Jesus came. He was actually working out and in action, casting out demons and healing people. And this was a very real work that the Father had sent him to do. This was part of the Father's will and plan for these people's lives, was to bring this to them. And we see that Jesus says, even him taking on the cross, he took our illnesses and bore our diseases. And so there is something about the healing nature of what Jesus came to do for all time. We see this again, Peter picks up the same idea. And this isn't salvation healing. This is actual physical healing. The word used by Peter about being healed is actually used many other places in the New Testament for healings of physical illnesses as Jesus goes about healing people. And so we see that this idea of healing was part of Jesus's ministry, and something he did on the cross. And so all of us following after Jesus and all time after Jesus, we can come into that healing that he's brought. And we see this in James, where it says a simple prayer of faith brings healing. So as we pray and we believe, sometimes that's just how God brings healing. There are other ways that God brings healing into our lives. And this can be emotional healing, but also a lot of times it's physical healing, or in this case, deliverance from demonic oppression of some sort. So here in Luke 6:17 through 19, we again say, and he came down with them and stood on a level place with a great crowd of disciples and a great multitude of people from all Judea and Jerusalem and the seacoast of Tyre and Sidon, who came to hear him and to be healed of their diseases. And those who were troubled with unclean spirits were cured. And all the crowd sought to touch him, for power came out of him and healed them all. So this is an amazing scene. This is a large crowd of people. And it says that, they came to be healed, to be cured of diseases, and power came out of him, and he healed them all. Everyone who showed up to this healing meeting got healed. And not only that, there were a lot of them. He never stopped for a single one of them and said, no, not you today. Never said, oh, that sickness is doing good for your life. He didn't do that. He just said, come, just come. And they all got healed. And I want to bring this into a moment. This was in Luke 6. So this was during Jesus's ministry, but we see something really similar happen in Acts 5, in verses 14 to 16. And more than ever, believers were added to the Lord, multitude of both men and women, so that they even carried out the sick into the streets and laid them on cots and mats. that as Peter came by, at least his shadow might fall on some of them. The people also gathered from the towns around Jerusalem, bringing the sick and those afflicted with unclean spirits, and they were all healed. I mean, these are almost parallel situations, right? They said the people gathered from the towns around Jerusalem. So this could be near a similar place because, in Luke, Jesus said Judea and Jerusalem. And here in Acts 5, we see again, it's the people around Jerusalem. All the sick people are coming out. This is maybe a year or two later. I'm not quite sure on the timing of Luke 6 to Acts 5. Jesus has already ascended, and we see his disciples doing the exact same work he did, and everyone gets healed yet again in this moment. And the people with unclean spirits are being freed. And we see just this tremendous moment of the will of God being expressed through the disciples. And so I know that for some of us, this is something we would love to see again. We would love to say, God continue to work in healing to the point where, we see this very thing happen where, a whole town of people comes out and gets healed of anything that they have. And, so we don't see even in the church age, under the disciples, people being turned away with their illnesses or, oh, there's something stuck to your sickness. No, they were dealing with both the unclean spirits and the illnesses in both these situations, and people were getting completely healed. And I just want to make sure, we continue to look back that this is the Father's will being expressed both through Jesus and the disciples, which is just a beautiful thing to how we start to form our perspective of what God looks like and his love for us and mercy, that he doesn't just want us a little bit saved. He wants us delivered, healed, and free. Now, that might take a journey on our part to come into that. But in that process, we go through it with God and we look at him as this God of good, that he's putting good into our lives. And I think a lot of times this raises our expectation for what a good God looks like. So thank you.